Donc, nous allons reprendre nous entamons donc la dernière étape de notre atelier qui consiste à traiter, donc lors de cette table ronde qui va être animée par Karim Medjad, les problématiques de l'impact environnemental et social des projets d'énergie renouvelable marine, et également les mécanismes en ce qui concerne donc de l'adhésion des populations concernées au développement de ces projets. Donc je passe la parole à Karim Medjad pour commencer cette table ronde. C'est comme tu veux.
Considering that my colleague David Simmons will be participating online, I think it's just consistent to stick to English. So this is what we're going to do, if it's all right with you all. The idea is fairly simple. I mean, the environmental impact of such projects is a very broad topic, just as, participatory matters. So I'm going to stick to what we have been witnessing in the course of this mission, which I believe are very interesting points. Regarding environment, the question of environment in general, we have been facing some sort of objection with our counterparts based on the fact that, given the size of the island concerned, obviously the environmental impact of whatever they might do is quite limited. Therefore, why should they put that on top of their priority list? That was one of the first objections, which is, I would say, kind of a traditional objection you get when you go outside of the EU, okay? But the second objection was, I think, quite relevant to the discussion we had today. It was, if you bring these kind of issues on the table, you are going to divert expertise. I have limited, me as a Minister of Energy, I have limited human resources. We have priorities. I'm sorry to say that environment is not on top of our list. Therefore, talking environment or talking new technologies means putting one of my people on the file, working, trying to figure out what the implications will be, trying to figure out what has to be done. And this means diverting these resources from other projects. Am I prepared, me as a minister of government, am I prepared to do that? I'm not sure. Give us very good reasons to do that. And we felt it was not so easy, in fact, to convince our counterpart, given that kind of constraint they were facing. That's the first point I would like to mention about environment, okay? So that we exit, I would say, the main road of the environmental narrative, okay? I'd like to discuss the real issues, not just environment in general. The second thing regarding participatory project, it's one question that has been discussed sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly today, the whole day, which is this. You want to involve people. If you get into governance, and that's a point that Monique was mentioning earlier, you get into governance and you involve people, you have two issues about governance. First is local, second is regional. These are two separate issues. Local means make sure that if you bring local people in the project, there is no risk because they are not prepared to face such risks. So in theory, you could say, okay, this is a risky project, you're grown up people, it's not like that. In practice, people expect not to be facing risks, hence the overemphasis on well-known technologies as opposed to new technologies. And the second issue being regional, it's a totally different matter in the sense that whenever you talk regionalization, it makes a lot of sense for many reasons that everybody understands. Like, for example, we can mutualize resources, we can share expertise, we can share best practices and so forth. But talking regionalization, and that's one of our key findings, as me as the part of the legal team, one of my key findings was that regionalization and local, very local development were in fact intertwined, because we cannot come up with a regional agreement. Well, we could come up in theory with a regional agreement, but this will take forever. If you want to come up with something sensible and meaningful in the medium run, this has to be some kind of collaboration at grassroots levels across islands, meaning some kind of participatory type involvement. So one of my most puzzling findings was that those in the best position to contribute to regional development are in fact the local people, because they can come up with visible projects, visible best practices, and share them. So the main issue from where I stand, and where I, as a lawyer, stand, and my colleague here is going to maybe see things otherwise, and David as well. But I think it's a nice way to launch the debate among us. From where I stand, the critical issue of regionalization is to come up with communication channels across islands, which are well, missing today, okay? There is no communication channel because there are a lot of obstacles, not the least being language. Hence, the importance of launching the process, excuse me, launching the process through some types of joint training programs that would be taught in both languages. And we had very fruitful contacts, David and I, with our colleagues from the University of West Indies and the Barbados. And one of our colleagues from there came when we had this workshop in St. Lucia. There we have something, this is an avenue which I believe is worth exploring. Another avenue which I believe is worth exploring is the question of governance. All the players share concerns about civil society involvement, but simply don't have the tools, don't have the models to apply. This is, in my opinion, one, beyond technological training, one of the central areas where we could come up with joint training and some type of standard model that could circulate across islands is governance, local governance, and participatory governance in general, because nobody really knows where to begin. Everybody is happy to talk about it, but nobody knows where to begin in practice. And this is not easy. Participatory governance is extremely complex to establish, so we have to come up with something that is altogether feasible and that can be shared. So it has to be something that makes sense everywhere, meaning there is a need for some sort of forum, which we lack. We lack communication channel to exchange best practices, to circulate and confront views, and we lack a forum where we can meet on a regular basis to exchange best practices. So this is, I'll be happy to discuss details, but this is where I think it is interesting to launch the discussion. So first, the connection, well, first the question of the standing of environment as an issue in that part of the world, okay, considering the other constraints and the other priorities local governments have. Second, the fact that this, of all regions, this is one of the regions where communication across island is critical and where it is missing the most. And from what I have seen, this is a big gap that should be somehow filled. And this is not easy for a number of reasons, including the language. So I'm more or less done on this introductory part. I would like to give the floor to my colleague. So, David, maybe you want to say something?
Hi, good morning. Are you all seeing me, hearing me? First of all, let me say thank you very much for this opportunity to share some thoughts with you. I really apologize for not being able to be in Brussels with all of you today. One could argue that the nice, warm Caribbean weather is a good reason to stay back here. But I have no doubt that in-person engagement would have benefited us tremendously. So my sincerest apologies for not. Karim, thanks very much. Your thoughts, you touched on several issues there. I realize that the topic here we're concerned about is the impact of the social and environmental impacts on looking at issues related to wave energy. But you touched on several different issues which I thought of a regional nature, and maybe would spend a little time discussing some of them. In a sense, I mean, I agree with just about everything that you said here. But what I wanted to do was to just unpack a bit some of what we discuss in here. Because I believe that meetings such as this not only supposed to sort of highlight the issues that we are faced with, but also explore some sort of opportunities that may be there. And in looking at, and just taking consideration some of what you said from a regional perspective, when we look at the countries of the region, and primarily the OECS, because this is the context in which we're looking at this whole issue, when we look at the OECS, what we'll see is that there are several levels of regional engagement taking place in the region. And at the top of that list is the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. They've got a very vibrant renewable energy program going in the OECS, which all member states are party to. But then their focus is primarily on issues dealing with solar. Another issue that's been coming up of late recently is that of geothermal energy. Right? And for those countries, the interest in renewable energy is very high, and that's primarily because the cost of energy is very high to those countries. So looking for alternatives in the renewable energy sector is very high on the list. So that is why the OECS has been for a long time now involving their member states in looking at how they could cooperate a lot more with each other. You also have other regional entities like Carribean, primarily concerned with bringing countries together to address issues relating to the electricity. And they also are looking at issues with renewable energy. All the member states, again, part of that whole Carribean organization. And they too are very much concerned in terms of how they involve the private sector in seeking to find better opportunities for regional cooperation and integration. Then we have the CARICOM-led agency, that is CCRE, and they're primarily involved in exploring opportunities for renewable energy. But when we look at all of them across the entire landscape, what we see is that a lot of them are primarily concerned with the major issues, as I mentioned, primarily looking at issues related to solar energy, looking at issues with respect to wind energy, and also looking at how they could explore the emerging issues of geothermal energy taking place in some of the countries. So the question is, where does the marine renewable energy fit in all of that? From our research over the past year, what we realized is that as much as they are familiar and they are aware, and particularly at the CQ level, that they are exploring or providing opportunities for the countries to learn more about marine renewable energy, the issue for them there is cost. But we're not dwelling so much on that particular aspect of it. What we want to talk about were the opportunities there for regional cooperation. So again, what I'm saying is basically, while they engage with each other through all those various channels, and they talk to each other, what we're seeing more of the opportunities are where they tend to engage most of all. And they tend to operate more at a functional level. That is, where there are policies that they could harmonize policies, they will explore those opportunities. Issues as far as accessing funding and finance are concerned, they're very much involved in seeking opportunities to do that, and they cooperate with each other in doing that, especially when it comes to project development, because what they realize is that for several of the funding agencies, there's a tendency to package the assistance so that if several countries could benefit from it at any one go, it's a lot more economical for them as opposed to trying to deal with one specific country. And more importantly, because again, agencies like the OECS have been around for quite some time, they find it much better to work through them than to work with the individual countries. So to some extent, there is some degree of functional cooperation taking place. Right? What we're not seeing, and that's what we heard a lot about, was that when we got down to the regulatory phase or the actual engagement with each other, I'm getting a feedback, sorry. Yes. When it came to engaging with each other to establish common regulatory platforms across the region, or even for sharing of resources, that is where there tended to be a lot more difficulty, or we didn't see much movement. Notwithstanding, what we heard is that the countries are trying and moving as quickly as possible to ensure that the regulatory environment is created. I mean, there may be working on the same sort of issues, but in terms of what we did not see was where there were actual efforts being made for them to ensure that they have one sort of regulatory authority across the board. Now, some may say that that is kind of a challenge for them, but let's not forget that the OECS has been around for quite some time, and they tend to establish sort of a platform whereby countries cooperate. That has been around for quite some time, and they have examples of that. For instance, with respect to the procurement of drugs, they have a common platform for doing that. With respect to the areas of setting policy on environmental issues, they've got established common platforms for that. However, what they've not been able to do is to get the countries to establish the legal sort of basis on which they may be able to cooperate from a regulatory standpoint. Oh, I should also mention to that in the area of telecommunications, they have a common platform by which they all cooperate. So it's not new to them. They've explored those areas. They've been very successful in some of those things. So the question then is not so much, is it so impossible, so difficult? I personally believe, and maybe Karen could comment on that a little later, that one of the challenges that they face as far as that is concerned is overcoming the hurdles of the private sector involvement, because the private sector operate by different rules. And because different rules will apply in different countries. So what one private sector may be able to live with in one country may not be the same in another country. So I think this is one of the serious issues as far as the further entrenching regional cooperation in the region is concerned. So I think, we have to explore, first of all, what are the areas that are hindering the countries from really working closer together, because some of them have expressed interest. A lot of the technocrats below the decision-making level, they have expressed an interest. They point to all the areas in which they think cooperation would be of greater interest to the region. But for whatever reason, they've not been able to see that movement taking place at the governmental level to ensure that there's greater regional cooperation. At the regional conference in Miami earlier this year, we heard several private sector entities, we heard the financial institutions, they're all talking about how they would like to see greater cooperation. So I think what we could say then at this stage, and I'll just bring my intervention on that part to an end here, but I just wanted to make the point that there is that great desire for regional cooperation. Right? So I think part of the discussion we can have here today is the extent to which we can maybe explore what are some of those aspects of regional cooperation that present the greatest threat, greatest problems to the countries, and how they can overcome them. So that's my little intervention on the whole issue of regional cooperation, and I'll be happy to hear from the audience or from other panelists on that particular topic. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Maybe, Céline, you have something to add.
Excuse me, but I will speak in French again. Merci David, merci Karim. Beaucoup de choses, il y a beaucoup de choses à dire. Moi, je n'ai pas la prétention de connaître suffisamment le contexte caribéen et gouvernemental, donc je vais plutôt ramener le sujet de manière très terre à terre, parce que je crois que il faut rappeler que nous sommes sur un secteur émergent qui est en train d'accélérer et que nous sommes quelque part pionniers dans ce secteur, comme on a pu le connaître par le passé avec les énergies éoliennes en particulier, et puis solaires par la suite. Donc il faut déjà accepter que nous sommes quelque part des artisans. Et je pense que pour pouvoir imaginer... la coopération régionale, évidemment, fait beaucoup de sens. On l'a développé toute la matinée, tout aujourd'hui. On voit évidemment les intérêts qu'il y a. Mais je crois qu'il faut et je parle avec modestement ma vision de développeur et mon expérience de développeur concret de projet. Je pense qu'il faut justement concrétiser les choses. Les gens ont besoin, quels qu'ils soient, d'avoir une projection d'une réalité possible. Donc matérialiser de quoi on parle. Et donc ça démarre par la base, ça démarre par le terrain, ça démarre par un projet. Et c'est de ce projet qu'on va pouvoir remonter en fait. Moi je le vois comme ça et c'est ce que j'ai vécu par le passé dans l'éolien terrestre. Il n'y avait pas de réglementation qui existait. On prenait les gens pour des fous, les gens qui se sont lancés dans l'éolien terrestre. On disait mais qu'est-ce qu'ils veulent faire? Et donc c'est pareil là aujourd'hui, on va démarrer à un ou plusieurs endroits, on va concrétiser la chose. On n'a pas toutes les réponses au début, il faut l'accepter. Par contre, on va passer petit à petit des messages pour embarquer les différentes parties prenantes et essayer de trouver une voie effectivement de coopération, mais en se rattachant à un projet concret. Et alors, c'est peut-être une vision naïve, mais en tout cas, c'est ce qu'on a pu expérimenter et qui fait que des projets ont pris forme. Donc là, c'est ma position, le message que je voulais simplement délivrer cet après-midi.
Thank you, Céline. Maybe I'd like to add one thing to complete both my colleagues' interventions. We all agree, basically, on what is to be done. The big question is, first, is this a subject that is relevant to develop the type of network, because this is there's a larger investment. Is the type of subject that is relevant to develop such network? The answer is yes, we agree on that. Green and blue energies make sense for that. Second question, who can do it? We also agree that there are some players that would be both happy to contribute and who are, well, reasonably neutral. David mentioned Carribean, which is a very interesting player in my opinion, because they're absolutely neutral as far as technologies are concerned. These people are into energy supply. It can come from one source or another, they don't care. And they're happy to disseminate whatever source of energy is available, and they're happy to discuss whatever alternative is available. So in that sense, these type of private players are interesting. And they're interesting and prepared to contribute. Now, when Céline talks about, well, you have to start somewhere. Let's start with the project. It has to be somehow bottom-up. I think we all agree on bottom-up. The question to me is not whether it should or shouldn't be bottom-up. It has to be bottom-up. The question to me is, once you have a project somewhere, what happens? Who knows it? How are the results disseminated? How are they discussed? How are they weighed? How is this project duplicated if successful? How is it amended if not? This question brings us back again to the question of the quality of the communication channels across, within the players in one island, but also across islands. And this is where we have this gap is constantly back in the picture. Okay, we lack that, and we lack it in other dimensions, on other subjects. I mean, obviously, regional cooperation is not a subject that is limited to energy, but what we found interesting is that, and I think David will agree with me on that part. Although he's always the good cop and I'm the bad cop in this kind of, but okay, he will agree with me because there is a good cop component for everyone here. Energy is a relevant topic to invest on such network. Okay, now this network can be used for many other purposes. One being the one I mentioned earlier, which is participatory governance, which could apply to any kind of utility. Beyond energy, this would apply to water as well, for example. But regardless of the topic, we have here the ingredients to launch something at regional scale that doesn't wait for the big guys like OECS and other players to get on board. The problem we have, and perhaps David will disagree with me on that one, but the problem we have is this. There is one landmark, which is telecom. Telecom brought regional cooperation very far in the Caribbean, and this is kind of a model that is tempting to somehow reproduce on every subject. But telecom is special. Telecom is unique in many respects because telecom came with incentive to move fast, to develop it fast. We cannot say we come with similar incentives. In that sense, we have to play one lower below. And this is still about bottom-up processes. We have to play one level below at the NGO communication level, which could bring us far enough, in my opinion. I think you had a question to ask, right? Okay. So maybe someone has a question, or maybe Céline, David want to add something? David seems like he wants to add something.
I could add something. Just David.
Go ahead, David. Monique will talk after.
Yeah, Karim, I wouldn't think would come with you. Yeah, no, I think, we agree on most of those things. And I think your point about Carolec there being a neutral party is a very good point as far as the, any sort of form of technology which the countries have adopted. I think that what they are battling with, and I think that's what they probably have not really come to appreciate as yet, is the extent to which that anything which they pursue must be a sort of an eclectic mix of various renewable forms of energy as opposed to any one particular form. So having said that, I think what it is up to now, the individual entity or the whichever technology that one is putting forward at any one time to demonstrate to the countries the extent to which that particular technology really presents an opportunity, not just by itself, but also in combination with other forms of technology to really provide them with the answers that they're looking for as far as, the renewable energy supply is concerned. So from that standpoint, I think, and again, it takes me back to the point because I'm thinking all along as to what it is we were hearing at that regional conference in Miami earlier this year, and there we had both the private sector, the financial institutions, as well as, the representatives of the various countries. And what we were hearing was that others are waiting to move. But the reason why they've been held back is because the regulatory instruments were not carefully laid out for them to really go forward. So the question does become, once that regulatory platform has been established, would we see the private sector doing, as you said, Karim, and really coming forward and stepping in and saying to them, hey, we believe that this is the kind of energy mix that would most likely provide you with the responses or the answers that you're looking for to address your current problems. So, that's my take on it, that I think, there is room there for the private sector to play a very significant role. The question is, what exactly are they waiting for? Is it just the regulatory constraints that are in the respective country? And to what extent then the regional entities can, or it does not really make a difference whether they're able to play any kind of really meaningful role in really taking things forward?
It's not just regulatory constraint, it's a real issue of economies of scale. Some projects can't break even at the scale of an island. And we especially when you talk about the type of legal resources, if I look at it from my window, the type of legal resources that are required for certain types of legal models, you need to share that. And that means somehow creating some kind of pool of experts. Monique, you want to say something?
Oui, je vais soulager les interprètes, nos collègues amis interprètes derrière, et je vais parler français. Au niveau de la coopération régionale, je crois qu'il y a un consensus. Alors c'est marrant parce qu'on n'y arrive pas, mais tout le monde est d'accord, de la Banque interaméricaine de développement, en passant par la Banque mondiale, et Karim et moi, nous avons suffisamment travaillé dans la Caraïbe pour savoir que tout le monde est d'accord pour dire qu'il faut développer des unités, même OSIS, par l'intermédiaire de Chamberlain, où il y a eu un rapport où on préconise véritablement des PPP units, des unités d'expertise spécifiquement dédiées à des problématiques qui requièrent une expertise pointue, dont les pays n'ont pas forcément ça dans leur carton. Et donc là, véritablement, au niveau des bailleurs de fonds, tout le monde est d'accord. OK ? Il y a un autre point que j'aurais aimé soulever avec vous, à l'instar de ce qui se passe à la Banque africaine de développement. Vous avez un fonds, une facility, je ne sais pas ce qu'on dit, un fonds, non ? Facility, voilà, ça a été financé au départ, c'était la Norvège qui s'est lancée là-dedans. Il se trouve que c'est un de nos camarades de promo Khalidou Gadio, qui a lancé cette initiative qui s'appelle African Legal Support Facility. D'accord ? Où chaque État membre peut faire appel à cette unité experte qui siège donc en Côte d'Ivoire, à Abidjan, au sein de la Banque africaine de développement et qui apporte son soutien à la demande des États. Donc il n'y a pas de contraintes, on ne leur impose pas quoi que ce soit, mais qui donc aide au niveau de tout ce qui est développement, évaluation, montage de projets, négociation également. Parce qu'effectivement, les États n'ont pas nécessairement ni la capacité, ni les moyens, ni le niveau des fois. Donc les négociations ne se font pas sur un plan d'égalité. N'oublions pas que dans ce genre de projet, on se marie pour 10, 15 ans, 20 ans. Et donc, quand vous avez le secteur privé qui arrive avec son armada de juristes, de banquiers, d'assureurs, et qu'en face, on n'a pas les moyens de faire cette grille tarifaire, de comprendre quelles sont les équations et comment on arrive et qu'est-ce qui bénéficie au gouvernement hôte ou où est-ce que ça joue parce qu'ils n'en ont aucune idée. Oui, effectivement, je pense que cette pertinence-là a tout son sens. Et donc, au niveau coopération, je pense qu'effectivement, on peut, à l'instar de ce qui se fait encore une fois en Afrique, donc effectivement la BAD est une histoire un peu plus longue au niveau de son fonctionnement et de ses activités, mais je pense que ça pourrait être un modèle intéressant à appliquer notamment dans le secteur de l'énergie qui est véritablement un problème, une entrave, une problématique qui entrave le développement des États caribéens et qui est préjudiciable aussi parce que vulnérable au niveau du changement climatique et de tout ce toutes les conséquences que cela entraîne. Donc s'il y a une recommandation à l'issue de l'étude de pré-faisabilité que nous avons menée et qui est cross-sectorielle, c'est-à-dire qu'elle va au-delà même des énergies renouvelables marines, au niveau de la gouvernance et de la coopération, c'est bien ce genre de mécanisme qui conviendrait de promouvoir, d'encourager et de financer.
Merci Monique.
Ça marche ? Non, juste, je reviens toujours à l'échelon local aussi. Tu parlais, Karim, de canaux de communication. Effectivement, c'est un vaste sujet. Comment on peut vraiment mettre... Ça nous dépasse, c'est pas à nous, à notre niveau, de répondre à toutes ces questions. Mais on voit bien, par exemple, on avait discuté avec des pêcheurs, ne serait-ce qu'entre Martinique et Guadeloupe, ils échangent pas vraiment. Donc il faut aussi que ça passe par ces échanges de corporations, si on peut appeler ça comme ça. Mais ce que je voulais dire aussi, c'est qu'il y avait un gros travail, et ça va aussi au-delà des énergies marines que l'on porte, il y a un gros travail de pédagogie, d'éducation de la population en général, enfin d'éducation au sens de passer le message de la réalité dans laquelle on évolue, de la réalité des coûts de l'électricité aujourd'hui, de comment c'est produit. Je pense que beaucoup de personnes ne touchent pas ça du doigt, et déjà de faire passer ces messages-là, c'est pas évident. Parce qu'on s'adresse finalement souvent à des gens qui ont un certain niveau de diplôme, niveau social, qui vont... Mais ces projets, ils concernent tout un chacun. Et c'est comment on arrive à toucher tous ces gens-là. C'est pas que par les réseaux sociaux. Donc il y a un vrai sujet là-dessus aussi, et qui concerne toutes les énergies et tous les sujets en général. Mais ce sujet-là va contribuer à ce que les populations comprennent pourquoi on fait ce genre de projet, et donc faciliter leur acceptation ou l'adhésion des populations à ces projets. Et moins de suite lever des panneaux, nos paysages, notre environnement, etc. Et donc ça, c'est un gros travail, et qui doit se faire effectivement à une échelle gouvernementale, régionale, et pas là par le porteur de projet a un rôle à jouer, mais qui restera modeste. Et il faut vraiment agir de manière très large pour passer ces messages-là.
Oui, tu as raison, Céline. Juste, la vraie question, je pense qu'on est d'accord, la vraie question pour nous, mais chacun voit midi à sa porte, c'est ça qui est un peu compliqué dans cette histoire, mais la vraie question, c'est quand tu as une idée ou quelque chose qui marche, c'est comment tu le fais circuler. Et les modes de circulation, les modalités de circulation et les façons de faire sont des façons qui ne sont pas nécessairement connues. Donc moi je pense que évidemment c'est pas à nous de nous substituer aux acteurs locaux, mais c'est à nous de proposer des modèles collaboratifs. Parce que le risque sinon c'est que chaque île passe son temps à réinventer la roue. Et c'est ça qu'on doit essayer d'éviter dans ce secteur. David, you have something to say. Mr. Good Cop, what do you have to say? We can hear you.
On mute. Sorry about that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, that point is quite relevant. Again, if we go back to what we were hearing when we were traveling through the region, just meeting with persons one-on-one, the question everybody wanted that was on towns and most of the folks we spoke with was how economical would marine energy, how economical is marine energy? Because you're competing with things like solar, you're competing with initiatives. For instance, you look at, for a country like, a small country like Dominica, where they not only have opportunities for solar renewable energy, but they also have hydro energy, and now they're also exploring geothermal energy. So for them, and with a population of just about 80,000 people, they can more than meet their needs, in terms of renewable energy once all that infrastructure is up in place, right? So for them, there are two questions. Show us something that works, that we can embrace, but more importantly, going back to what we were talking about, how can we now explore that sort of regional connections that we have with other neighboring countries to share some of the surplus that is generated, And these are questions that I think we weren't able to provide upfront to some of those countries. But from what I've been hearing today in terms of one's ability to demonstrate things that work, issues that work. So I think anything that we do from here must seek to satisfy that kind of concern. Is it something that is economical? Is it something that can work? And we have to talk about the extent to which we can maybe look at some sort of a model, either that works in the Caribbean or in some of the small and developing states, and how important it can be in helping the countries meet their renewable energy goals. Thanks.
Important point. We regularly met interlocutors that told us, I'm going to say it with my words, that told us that they were waiting for the next round, basically, when there would be a more visible and convincing economic breakthrough. And this is something that we're witnessing right now.
Just a technical problem, David. You speak too fast. People love what you're saying, but just, slow down the pace, man. Okay? Thank you.
The interlocutors we had were saying, this is all interesting. This is the point I made earlier. This is all interesting, but we don't see enough to invest the resources it takes to include that new technology in the game, because we don't see an economic breakthrough here. It's not a huge economy that we would be making. So let's wait for the next generation. And this is actually what is happening as we speak with geothermal energy. I met interlocutors that tell me that as far as their geothermal energy is concerned, everybody's waiting now. Because something big is supposed to come soon, and meanwhile, nobody wants to do anything with the existing technology. So part of our job is also to find ways to fill that gap with something that still is relevant, irrespective of what people think about what the next generation of technology might bring. And that's also some part of the equation for us, to find something that is worth the investment. And this development of network is something that will always be meaningful, regardless of where we stand, because this can be applied to other things that some islands might find more urgent. I gave you the example earlier of water. In Guadeloupe, for example, it is badly needed, okay, to have some kind of participatory scheme for water. So as they wait for the economic breakthrough coming from some new technique, they can still apply the same model to something else. All utilities are concerned, in fact, and this is where I think certain things can be done. And also the question of, if you take the example that Céline gave earlier, we need to start somewhere. Fine, let's start somewhere. Let's do something, but let's disseminate the result. The dissemination channels are missing. Any questions, remarks, please?
Hi. So many thanks, Karim, David, and Céline, for your interventions and presentations. Speaking about other examples and like learning from others, I'm just wondering if there have been any similar projects which have taken place in the Pacific region, where the many islands in the Pacific, similar to the Caribbean, but also where they may actually be even more expensive to do such projects because of the distances involved and the issue with like laying some submarine cables there in that region. But I'm just wondering if there's anything that has happened in that region regarding this type of project which we may learn from for the Caribbean.
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. You have something, you know something about it, Céline, right? You know something, you worked on Tahiti, right? French Polynesia. My understanding, but please feel free to complete, my understanding is that there is a tradition of inter-island cooperation that goes back centuries, and that makes things much easier there. And the equation, especially the colonial split in the Caribbean, complicates much more the situation there. But please go ahead if you have something to add about that.
Yes, we are working in French Polynesia as well, in the Pacific area. There are some, so it's easier because all of the islands are part of the same organization, which is decentralized from France, but still part of the states. They have something like more than 100 islands, and 70 or 75 of them are inhabited. But even if the culture is very different from the one island to the other, there are still some common rules and regulations that maybe will make things easier for local cooperation.
Thank you. Any other comments, remarks, questions?
Juste un commentaire basique, mais qu'il faut rappeler quand même. Ce qui nous choque peut-être quand on ne connaît pas, enfin quand on découvre les territoires caribéens, c'est ou même en Polynésie certainement, c'est la difficulté d'aller d'une île à l'autre. Donc dans les canaux de communication, certes, on a le téléphone et Internet, mais ces projets, comme on disait, c'est quand même des relations du long terme, et cette difficulté de transport et des coûts aussi que ça génère, elle est réelle. Et je pense qu'elle donne aussi un frein à ce partage de connaissances et de bâtir des synergies. C'est du bon sens, mais...
David, you have another...
Just all of that, because I didn't get the translation on that one.
Okay. Unless there is another question, I think we can wrap up here.
Sorry, Karen, I just wanted to add something.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, let me try and slow down. On the issue of the environment and the social concerns, from an environmental standpoint, I think we should be aware that most of the countries of the region, well, for the OECS, they've been putting in place some marine spatial plans. And essentially what those marine spatial plans are seeking to do is to designate areas where certain activities can take place. Now, because for the countries, the major issues there really relate to issues like tourism, fisheries, recreational activities, these are the issues which have dominated any sort of discussion as far as marine spatial plans are concerned. So I think what we need to do now is to ensure that the whole issue of marine renewable energy, it enters that sort of discourse in the sense that by becoming aware that countries may want to explore opportunities for marine renewable energies, they may want to start looking at right-of-ways for establishing various pieces of equipment, the technology, but more importantly, for coming ashore and bringing some of the electricity generated onto the shore, right? So it's something that I think that we should also take into consideration in the discussions and in going forward to ensure that now those marine spatial plans, they're still at the planning stage in the sense that there's been discussion, they've developed a strategy, there's been developed an action plan, right? But those things are not set in concrete as yet, a good thing. So there may be opportunities now to ensure that there's a dialogue taking place with the countries so that they are aware of other initiatives that are likely to come on stream and that areas are set aside. It may still be a little too early to really determine exactly where things are going to be located, where you're going to be in placing equipment, but some sort of a general idea. Are those things going to be placed 2 miles offshore? Do you have to have a certain depth in terms of your seafloor to put in that sort of equipment? So these are the kind of things that we need to start that discussion with them so that if and when the technology becomes available, that they would have really created the opportunities to have that equipment coming on stream. Thank you.
This is a very important point. I agree. Unless there are other comments, I think we can move to the concluding remarks.
We have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Je ne sais pas si on a des. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
Je t'envie, parce que tu ne sais pas le temps qui règne ici à Bruxelles. Il fait froid, il pleut, il fait nuit, et donc on t'envie beaucoup. En tout cas, merci pour ta participation. Donc cet atelier s'achève. Alors je tenais, on va faire comme la cérémonie des Césars ou des Oscars, on va remercier. Donc premièrement, je tenais à remercier nos invités, ceux qui ont eu le courage de braver le froid et le climat pour venir gentiment nous écouter. C'est grandement apprécié. Pour votre information, il est important de savoir que nous avons 3 sites, en tout cas un site du projet, emrcaraïbes.com. Vous êtes encouragés à y aller. Même nos merveilleuses hôtesses qui nous ont accompagnés aujourd'hui, allez sur LinkedIn, cliquez, vous étiez là, c'était super, vous avez suivi, c'était passionnant. Un des critères de performance pour le projet EMR Caraïbes et les projets FEDER, c'est le nombre de clics sur les sites. Donc je vous encourage, encouragez-nous, soutenez-nous. Et donc, ça, c'était le premier point que je voulais faire. Le deuxième, Au niveau des étapes suivantes, nous avons omis de mentionner que nous allons mener 2 ateliers de restitution, un en Martinique, enfin pas des ateliers de restitution, excusez-moi, des ateliers de formation destinés donc aux techniciens, aux élus, aux personnes impliquées, soit au niveau du secteur public, soit au niveau du secteur privé, dans le développement de ces projets. Donc un à Martinique et un à et un à Antigua. Donc ça, c'est dans les prochaines semaines. Donc ça, nous allons finaliser notre rapport et toutes ces informations, bien sûr, se retrouveront sur les sites dédiés au projet et sur les sites des différents partenaires de ce projet, à savoir IS-EMD, j'aime pas dire IS, donc je dis IS-EMD, Météolien, Equa Consulting et David Simon Associates et Hill & Hill. Ça, c'était donc pour que vous ayez des informations. Vous aurez aussi les sources, une espèce de biographie où vous aurez les sources de tous les documents que nous avons compulsés, les données, etc., qui, je pense, pourront être utiles à toute personne se sentant concernée ou impliquée dans ce domaine. Je voulais également remercier tous les techniciens. Je pense que parmi tous les 3 ateliers, puisqu'il y en a un qui a eu lieu, le premier a eu lieu au Memorial Act, qui est le musée de l'esclavage à Pointe-à-Pitre, en Guadeloupe. Donc ça a été le premier qui s'est déroulé le 27 juin dernier. Ensuite, nous avons eu le 30 juin un autre atelier à Sainte-Lucie, à Castries. Et donc, c'est le 3e qui clôt donc, notre tournée internationale sur ces aspects à Bruxelles. Et je dois dire que vous êtes de loin vous avez été compétents, vous êtes gentils. Ça ne veut pas dire que les autres étaient méchants, hein, mais bon. Ça ne mange pas de pain. Et très professionnels. Et donc, tous les gens qui ont participé ici le reconnaissent. Donc, on voulait véritablement tenir à vous remercier pour tout ce que votre assistante, votre assiduité, quand bien même, voilà, il y avait nous et d'autres, mais il y avait nous aussi. Jules, au niveau de la photo, merci beaucoup. Nos interprètes, donc Mireille et Bernard, merci infiniment pour votre patience et des fois, effectivement, les efforts que vous avez faits pour suivre le débit effréné de David ou celui de Karim. Et donc, merci également. Merci aux hôtesses. Donc, je crois que j'ai Marieka et puis... oui, hôtesse étudiante. Hein, d'avoir pris votre temps... voilà, et d'être venu. Et puis, j'espère que vous avez appris quelque chose. Que vous voyez que tous les consultants, c'est pas des tirs au flanc, puis c'est des gens qui font vraiment leur travail. Quelquefois, ça peut être interprété différemment. Et donc, Garance, merci d'être venu du Burundi. Et donc, de braver le froid. Et donc, encore une fois, merci. Nous avons un petit cocktail qui nous attend pour clôturer cet atelier, cette journée. Et merci à toute l'équipe, évidemment, qui a participé, des experts. Voilà. À bientôt. On fait une photo de famille qui concerne tout le monde. Hein. Il n'y a pas genre, non, mais moi, il faut que je m'occupe de la console ou non, il faut que je les branche. On vient tous prendre la photo, s'il vous plaît.